Henry Montgomery was a man who had achieved everything he had ever dreamed of. Of humble origins, he grew up in a poor suburb of Detroit, but his ambition led him to study at one of the most prestigious universities in the country, and then to build an empire in the real estate sector. Now at age 52, Henry was the president of one of the largest urban development companies in New York, with a fortune that exceeded billions. But along with his success came arrogance and contempt for people he deemed failures. For Henry, life was a competition, and he firmly believed that those who were on the streets or in need of help simply didn't try hard enough. On a cold November afternoon, Henry left a luxurious restaurant in Midtown Manhattan. He was satisfied, not only from the meal, but also because he had just closed a deal that would make him millions. Dressed in an elegant tailored suit, he hurried to his car, a black Mercedes-Benz that gleamed under the city lights. As he walked down the sidewalk, a thin voice stopped him. "Sir, can you please help me?" A child, no older than 8, with dirty clothes and big pleading eyes, reached out his hand towards Henry. The boy looked vulnerable, his cheeks pink from the cold and his body shivering beneath a worn coat. Henry took a quick look at the child without stopping walking. He frowned and replied coldly, "Sorry, kid, I don't have time for that." Without waiting for a response, he got into his car and drove off, leaving the boy behind, invisible amid the hustle and bustle of the city. In the days that followed, Henry thought no more about the incident. His life continued as usual: meetings, business dinners, lavish parties. He prided himself on his ability to stay focused, to not let himself be distracted by little things. But fate had other plans. 2 weeks later, while driving to work, Henry felt strangely tired. His vision became blurred, and before he could react, he lost control of the car. The Mercedes collided violently with a post on the side of the road. When he woke up in the hospital, Henry was disoriented. His right leg was immobilized and he felt intense pain in his back. The doctor, a middle-aged man with a serious look, entered the room and gave him the news. "Mr. Montgomery, the accident caused significant damage to your spine. Recovery will be slow, and it is possible that you will require intensive care in the coming weeks." Henry was stunned. He, the man who controlled every aspect of his life, now found himself dependent on others for the most basic tasks. It was a humiliation he had never imagined experiencing. The only person who stayed by Henry's side during his recovery was a nurse named Evelyn. She was a strong woman in her early 30s, with a face that showed both compassion and weariness. Despite his condition, Henry maintained his arrogance, treating Evelyn with indifference. He didn't like needing her, being vulnerable, but Evelyn never reciprocated Henry's coldness. She cared for him with infinite patience, helping him with every little progress, from his first steps to painful physical therapy sessions. Little by little, Henry began to open up, driven by a mix of curiosity and frustration. "Why do you do this? Why care for someone like me?" he asked one day, unable to hide the bitterness in his voice. Evelyn looked into his eyes, and for the first time Henry saw something deeper in her. "Because I believe everyone deserves a second chance," she replied calmly. "Everyone has something to learn, even those who think they already know everything." That was the moment that started the change within Henry. But the real impact would come when he discovered who Nurse Evelyn really was, and how their lives were intertwined in ways he never could have imagined. The days in the hospital became an exhausting routine for Henry. Every movement was painful, every physical therapy session a battle. For a man accustomed to absolute control, dependence was a devastating blow to his pride. The only constant in his life was Evelyn, the nurse who seemed to always be there, ready to help him without expecting anything in return. As the weeks went by, Henry began to pay more attention to Evelyn. He noticed the way she treated every patient with the same dedication, regardless of who they were or where they came from. There was something about her that intrigued him, a quiet strength that contrasted with his own arrogance. One afternoon, as Evelyn helped him sit up, Henry couldn't help but ask, "Do you have children, Evelyn?" She hesitated for a moment before responding. "I have a son, yes, he is everything to me." Henry noticed a sparkle in her eyes when she spoke of her son, but also something else, a shadow of concern. He didn't ask anything else at that moment, but curiosity was gnawing at him inside. Who was Evelyn's son? Why didn't he ever see him? Days later, while Henry was at a physical therapy session, he saw Evelyn talking to another nurse in the hallway. He only heard fragments of the conversation, but enough to pick up on something that made him uncomfortable. The other nurse mentioned something about financial difficulties and trying to protect her son. Henry pretended not to hear, but the words echoed in his mind. That night, while alone in his room, Henry decided to investigate Evelyn further. Using his phone, he began searching for information about her. After a few minutes, he found a social network where Evelyn had posted some old photos. In one of them, there was her and a boy of approximately 8 years old smiling in a park. The child's face was familiar, but Henry couldn't remember where. Suddenly, a flash of memory hit him like a bolt of lightning. The child in the photo was the same one he had ignored on the street weeks ago. Henry froze as he realized the connection. The mother of the child he despised was now taking care of him every day, treating him with kindness he didn't deserve. Overcome with a mixture of shame and remorse, Henry couldn't sleep that night. He spent hours tossing and turning in bed, racked with guilt. How could he be so insensitive? How could he treat Evelyn and her son with such indifference? The next day, Henry tried to act normal, but the truth weighed heavily on him. During physical therapy, he finally decided to confront Evelyn. "I saw a photo of you with your son. It's the same boy I saw on the street, isn't it?" Evelyn stopped what she was doing and looked at him, surprised. There was an unshakable calm in his gaze. "Yes, Henry. He's my son, Noah." Henry felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. Why didn't you ever say anything? Why do you keep taking care of me?" Evelyn took a deep breath as if she was choosing her words carefully. "Because, Henry, I believe that people can change. And also because, as a mother, I understand that life is difficult for all of us. You made a choice that day, but it doesn't define who you are forever." Evelyn's words penetrated deep into Henry's soul. He was used to being judged by others, to being feared or admired, but he had never been treated with such understanding. For the first time in his life, Henry didn't know what to say. He was used to solving problems with money, but here, what he faced was something much more complex. The need to change, to redeem himself. Over the next few days, Henry began asking Evelyn questions about Noah. It turned out she was a single mother, struggling to balance work and caring for her son, who attended a public school in a tough neighborhood. Noah was a bright boy, but he also faced challenges mainly due to his father's absence and financial difficulties. Little by little, Henry began to feel a deep desire to help. He realized he had the resources to make a real difference in Noah and Evelyn's lives, but he didn't know where to start. His own transformation was still in process, and he feared that his actions would be seen as a simple, charitable gesture to alleviate his guilt. One night, after a long and honest conversation with Evelyn, Henry decided he needed to do something meaningful. He quietly began using his influence to improve Evelyn and Noah's lives. He anonymously paid off Evelyn's medical debts, secured a scholarship for Noah to a quality private school, and provided them with a new apartment in a safe and comfortable area. But for Henry, that wasn't enough. He knew the true test would be facing his own demons, his arrogance, his pride, and his inability to see others as equals. Henry began to get involved in social projects, dedicating time and resources to helping families in vulnerable situations. He did this anonymously, without wanting recognition, just to feel like he was doing something that really mattered. With each act of kindness, Henry felt a part of himself healing. He was not only helping others but also rediscovering his own humanity. His relationship with Evelyn deepened, not as boss and employee, but as two people who, despite their differences, found a genuine connection based on respect and empathy. Evelyn noticed the change in Henry. He was becoming kinder, more patient, and most of all, more humble. Henry, in turn, began to see Evelyn as more than just Noah's mother or his nurse. She became a friend, a confidant, someone who helped him rediscover himself when he was at the lowest point in his life. As Henry continued his physical recovery, he realized that emotional and spiritual recovery was the real challenge. And with Evelyn by his side, he was determined to become a better person, not to redeem himself, but to finally find the peace that had always eluded him. Henry was recovering well physically. Doctors were amazed at the progress he made in such a short time, and the credit could not be given to medical treatment alone. It was clear that something else was driving Henry, a new purpose, a new way of seeing the world. However, fate was not finished with him. One night while in his apartment, a place that now seemed much bigger and emptier than before, Henry received a call that would change everything again. It was Evelyn, but this time, her voice was different. There was a tremor that Henry had never heard before. "Evelyn, what happened?" he asked, immediately on alert. "Henry, it's Noah. He didn't come home from school today." Henry's heart skipped a beat. He knew that the neighborhood where Noah studied was troubled, full of gangs and violence, one of the many reasons he had helped get the boy the scholarship. But knowing Noah was missing brought a panic he wasn't prepared to face. "I've already been to the police, but they're saying maybe he was just late. But I know, Henry, I know something's wrong. This isn't like him." Henry didn't hesitate. He took his car and drove directly to the neighborhood where Noah studied. As he crossed the dimly lit streets, he felt an anguish that he had not experienced before. All his achievements, his money and power, seemed useless in the face of the fear that something had happened to Noah. He found Evelyn outside the school, her eyes red from crying. She was surrounded by a few parents and neighbors, all trying to comfort her distraught mother. Henry hugged her, feeling the fragility of the moment, and promised he would do everything he could to find the boy. Hours passed as Henry and Evelyn searched for Noah. They walked the streets, asked anyone they met, but no one had seen the boy. The feeling of helplessness began to grow inside Henry. How could he, a man used to solving problems with a phone call, with a financial transaction, deal with something so beyond his control? Finally, in the early hours of the morning, Henry's phone rang. It was one of the detectives he had hired to help with the search. "Mr. Montgomery, we have a lead." A boy matching Noah's description was seen entering an abandoned building a few blocks from the school. Without thinking twice, Henry and Evelyn ran to the location. It was an old, dilapidated building, one of many that Henry had probably overlooked during his business activities. The door was ajar, and inside the smell of mold and decay was almost unbearable. Evelyn held Henry's hand as they climbed the rotting steps. Their hearts were beating fast, every noise making their nerves light up. Finally, on the third floor, they found Noah. He was huddled in a corner, shivering with cold and fear. When he saw his mother, his eyes filled with tears and he ran to her sobbing. "Evelyn, is he okay?" Henry asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Evelyn calmed Noah and looked at Henry, tears streaming down her face. "Yeah, he is. He was scared. A group of older kids bullied him into coming here." Henry felt relief so profound he could barely breathe. He knelt down beside Noah and for the first time looked directly into the boy's eyes. "I'm so sorry, Noah. I'm so sorry I didn't do more for you sooner." Noah, still shaking, looked at Henry with a mixture of confusion and gratitude. It was as if at that moment Henry was trying not only to comfort the boy, but also to make amends for a profound mistake he had made. After leaving the building, Henry took Evelyn and Noah back to their apartment, which he had secretly arranged. He didn't know what else he could do, but he knew he couldn't leave the situation like this. Henry decided it wasn't enough to just help Noah and Evelyn financially. He needed to do something more. The next day, Henry went to his lawyer's office. He decided to use part of his fortune to establish a foundation that would help children from underprivileged neighborhoods gain access to better opportunities, education, housing, healthcare. He wanted the foundation to be a reflection of what he now understood, that all children, regardless of where they came from, deserved the chance to have a dignified life. Creating the foundation was a quick process. Henry used his influence to attract donations and partners, and within weeks the foundation was up and running. He did not put his name on the institution, as he did not want recognition. He was doing this because he knew it was right. Despite his still fragile condition, Henry made a point of visiting the first schools and community centers the foundation was supporting. Evelyn and Noah were by his side, and for the first time in a long time, Henry felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The incident with Noah was the final catalyst in Henry's transformation. He now understood that his life had been guided by the wrong values: power, money, status. But thanks to Evelyn and Noah, he had discovered the true value of compassion, humility, and redemption. As the foundation grew and began to make a real difference, Henry finally found the peace that had always eluded him. He no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. He no longer needed to control everything around him. He was pleased to know that, for at least some people, he had done something that really mattered. The weeks following the incident with Noah marked a period of profound transformation for Henry. Creating the foundation brought not only a new purpose to his life, but also an inner peace he had never experienced before. Henry began dedicating much of his time to philanthropic work, visiting underserved communities, meeting struggling families, and, most importantly, listening to the stories of the people he was helping. However, his physical recovery was still a constant challenge. The physical therapy was painful, and although he was making progress, Henry knew his mobility would never be the same. He accepted this with a new serenity, realizing that physical limitations were nothing compared to the emotional emptiness he had felt for so many years. Now he had something more valuable, a reason to keep going. Evelyn and Noah became an essential part of her life. He spent hours with Noah, helping him study, playing basketball in the park, or just talking. The boy, who at first was shy and reserved, began to open up, showing a spark of curiosity and intelligence that Henry deeply admired. Evelyn, in turn, had become a confidant and friend. The two had built a relationship of respect and affection, although they never directly discussed the past or the difficult times they faced. One day, as Henry and Evelyn walked together after a visit to one of the community centers supported by the foundation, Evelyn finally broke her silence about what had been happening in their lives. "Henry, you've done amazing things for us, but I need to know, are you doing this out of guilt or because you really care?" The question took Henry by surprise. He stopped and looked at Evelyn, trying to find the right words. "At first, I think it was guilt," he admitted. "I saw Noah on the street, and when I realized he was your son, it was like a reality check. But Evelyn, that's changed. Now it's not about easing my conscience. I do this because I care. I really do. Because I want to make a difference, however small, in the world I leave behind." Evelyn smiled, a smile full of understanding. "I believe in you, Henry, and I'm glad Noah has someone like you in his life." But not everything was simple. Henry's transformation did not go unnoticed by his former business colleagues. Some began to question his decisions, believing he was losing focus on his business responsibilities. One of his oldest partners, Richard Blake, directly confronted him during a board meeting. "Henry, I don't understand your recent obsession with charity," Richard said, his voice thick with disdain. "We built this empire together, but now it seems like you're more interested in spending money on lost causes than ensuring our continued growth." Henry looked at Richard, feeling an old spark of anger but also something new, a steady calm. "Richard, what we built here is important, but it's not everything. If I die tomorrow, I don't want to be remembered just as the man who built skyscrapers. I want to be remembered as someone who made a difference in people's lives." "That's noble, Henry," Richard replied sarcastically, "but it doesn't pay the bills. It may not pay the bills you worry about, but it pays other, much more important ones," Henry replied, ending the discussion. He knew he wouldn't convince everyone, but that didn't matter to him anymore. He had found his purpose, and he would not let anything divert him from his path. The challenges continued to pile up. The foundation began to face financial difficulties, mainly because Henry, determined to keep his name out of the institution, was having trouble attracting new donors on a large scale. He realized that despite his good intentions, he had underestimated the complexity of running a philanthropic organization. Henry spent sleepless nights trying to find solutions to keep the foundation going. He was determined not to let his past mistakes destroy what he had started. It was then that Evelyn, always by his side, suggested something unexpected. "Henry, maybe it's time to reconsider. I know you want to do this anonymously, but you have a reputation that could bring more support to the foundation. If people know you're behind this, they'll feel more inclined to help." Henry was reluctant. He knew Evelyn was right, but he was afraid that putting his name on the foundation would distract from the institution's true purpose. However, The reality was that without this step, everything he had built could fall apart. Finally, Henry made a decision. He organized a gala fundraiser revealing for the first time to the public that he was behind the foundation. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Influential people, business people, and even former competitors attended the event, impressed by Henry's sincerity and humility. The foundation raised millions that night, ensuring its continuity and expansion. The change in Henry didn't go unnoticed by Noah, who now began to understand the impact his new friend was having on the world. One day, after a basketball game in the park, Noah approached Henry, sweaty and smiling. "Henry, you're like a superhero, you know that?" Noah said with the seriousness of a child who believes what he says. "You help people, you do good things. You don't need a cape or anything like that." Henry laughed, but Noah's words touched him deeply. "No, Noah, I'm not a superhero. I'm just someone who finally understood what's really important in life, and you and your mom helped me see that." As the months passed, Henry continued to grow, both as a person and as a philanthropist. His company, now run by a trusted team, flourished, allowing him to devote even more time to the foundation. He became a public advocate for social causes, using his influence to bring more attention and resources to issues he previously ignored. Evelyn and Noah remained in his life, not as dependents on his charity, but as friends and family. Henry knew he couldn't change the past, but he was determined to build a future where his mistakes wouldn't be repeated. Henry has found a new balance in his life, something that previously seemed impossible. He realized that true wealth wasn't in his bank account, but in the connections he made and the impact he made. He still faced challenges, but now, with the clarity of someone who had finally understood what it meant to truly live, Henry felt that after months of struggle and reflection, his life had finally found a balance. He was at peace with his past, involved in meaningful work through the foundation, and surrounded by people he respected and loved, like Evelyn and Noah. However, fate still had one last test for him, something that would test his new worldview and his resilience. The foundation's success had attracted a lot of attention, both positive and negative. Some old business partners, dissatisfied with the new direction Henry had taken, began to conspire against him. The thirst for power and envy became motivators for these people, and soon unfounded rumors and accusations about Henry's integrity and his philanthropic activities began to emerge. One of the main detractors was Richard Blake, the partner who had previously confronted Henry. Richard, driven by anger and jealousy, began a campaign to discredit Henry by spreading lies about misappropriation of funds and manipulation of donations. The accusations gained momentum, and soon, the media was full of headlines defaming Henry and his foundation. For Henry, this was a devastating blow. He had worked tirelessly to transform his life and to help others, and now, everything was being threatened by lies and misunderstandings. He found himself once again in the eye of a hurricane, but this time, the price was far greater than money or reputation. It was the very meaning of his new life. Evelyn, always by his side, tried to comfort him. "Henry, the people who really matter know who you are. They know the work you've done. Don't let these lies destroy what you've built." But Henry was distressed. The foundation, which had become his greatest achievement, was at risk. Donors began to withdraw their support, planned events were canceled, and the trust he had worked so hard to build was crumbling. For the first time since the accident, Henry felt like he could lose everything again, and the pain of that possibility was almost unbearable. Determined to clear his name and save the foundation, Henry decided to face Richard and expose the truth. He organized a press conference, something he had always avoided since he began his philanthropic journey. The night before the press conference, he was preparing to face the public and the media, knowing that this would be one of the most important moments of his life. On the day of the press conference, Henry entered the room full of journalists, cameras, and microphones. The atmosphere was charged with tension, but Henry was calm, determined to tell the truth. He began his speech directly, without beating around the bush. "Over the past few months, I have dedicated my life to a cause that I believe is greater than anything else I have ever done. The foundation was created to help those in need, to offer a chance to those, like me, who have not had all the opportunities from the beginning. However, there are those who try to tarnish this mission, using lies and misinformation to discredit the work we are doing. Henry paused, looking directly into the cameras. I'm not here to defend myself. I'm here to defend the truth. My life has changed since I started this work, and that's something no one can take away from me. I know the foundation has helped thousands of people, and we will continue to do it regardless of attempts to bring us down. He then presented documents and testimonies that proved the foundation's transparency and integrity, debunking the accusations made against him. The press conference became a turning point, with journalists beginning to realize the true intent behind the accusations. As he finished his speech, Henry felt a wave of relief. He had faced the last major challenge of his journey, and although he knew there was still a long way to go, he was more confident than ever that he could overcome any obstacle. After the press conference, Richard Blake was publicly confronted with the truth and, under pressure, ended up confessing his involvement in the attempt to sabotage Henry. With this, Henry's reputation was restored, and the foundation, which had almost been destroyed, received a new impetus. Donations started coming in again and community support grew exponentially. Henry, now more than ever, felt that his life had been completely transformed. He had faced his own demons, dealt with the consequences of his past, and emerged as a renewed person. The foundation prospered, helping even more people, and Henry was finally at peace with who he was. Evelyn and Noah remained by his side, not just as beneficiaries of his kindness, but as his true family. They represented everything Henry had learned about the value of empathy, compassion, and unconditional love. In the months following the press conference, Henry Montgomery's life entered a new phase of stability and purpose. The foundation, now solidly supported by donors and the community, has expanded its operations beyond New York, bringing education, health, and housing programs to cities across the United States. The impact was palpable. Families were taken off the streets, children had access to quality schools, and entire communities began to transform. Henry, however, was not content with just financing these projects. He got personally involved, visiting sites, talking to people, listening to their stories. Every trip he took, every life he touched, reinforced the meaning of his new existence. He had found a way of living that was infinitely more rewarding than any business success he had ever achieved. The relationship with Evelyn and Noah also blossomed. They became a constant part of Henry's life, not just as friends, but as a true family. Evelyn, with her poise and compassion, became someone Henry trusted completely. She was the anchor that kept him focused and committed, and Henry knew that without her, he would never have been able to change so much. Noah, in turn, grew up healthy and happy, surrounded by his mother's love and Henry's unconditional support. The boy, who was previously shy and insecure, now excelled at school, showing a natural talent for science. He was living proof that the right opportunities, given at the right time, could completely transform a life. One day, while walking through a park together, Noah looked at Henry with a mischievous smile. "Henry, you always tell me I can be whatever I want, don't you?" Henry nodded, curious to know where the boy was going. "Of course, Noah. You can be anything you dream of." Noah laughed as if he was keeping a secret. "So I decided, I want to be like you when I grow up. I want to help people too." Noah's words filled Henry with an emotion he could barely express. He stopped, knelt down in front of the boy and hugged him tightly. "You're already doing it, Noah. And you're going to be even better than me." That was Henry's greatest victory, knowing that he had planted the seed of good in someone so young and full of potential. He didn't need public recognition or awards. It was enough for him to know that his journey of redemption had inspired a new generation. As time passed, Henry became a respected and admired figure in his community, not for his money or power, but for the authenticity of his actions. He had managed to reconcile his past with his present, turning guilt and regret into fuel for a better future. Evelyn and Henry, now partners in every sense, began working together on the foundation, each contributing their unique skills. The foundation became a beacon of hope for many, and Henry knew that despite all the challenges, he had finally found what he had always sought: a life of meaning, guided by love and compassion. On the last night before opening a new community center in Detroit, the city where Henry had grown up and from which he had tried so hard to escape, He found himself alone in his office, reflecting on his journey. The walls were covered in photos and clippings, each representing a milestone in her transformation. Henry pulled out one of those photos, an old one of Evelyn and Noah, taken the first Christmas they spent together as a family. He smiled, feeling a rush of gratitude. His life had changed so much, but most importantly, he had changed. And he knew that of all the things he had achieved, the greatest of all was peace with himself. When Henry finally closed his eyes that night, he no longer thought about everything he had lost or gained in material terms. He thought about the lives he touched, the changes he made, and the knowledge that, no matter anything else, he had done what was right. And that, to Henry, was all that mattered, was all that. 5 years have passed since Henry Montgomery decided to change the direction of his life. The foundation he created continued to grow, now with projects in various parts of the country, bringing hope and opportunities to thousands of people. The transformation that began as a personal effort to find redemption became a movement that inspired many others to do the same. Henry, now in his late 60s, was at peace with himself. He continued to work actively at the foundation, but his life had become simpler and more focused on what really mattered. The man who once lived in a world of luxury and excess now found joy in the little things. A walk in the park, a quiet afternoon at home, and Noah's laughter echoing through the hallways. Noah, now a teenager, had grown into a bright young man full of promise. Not only did he excel at school, but he was also deeply involved in the foundation's activities, helping other young people find their way, just as Henry had done for him. Noah planned to study science and technology, with the dream of creating something that could change the world for the better, a dream he knew was possible thanks to Henry's support and inspiration. Evelyn, in turn, continued to be the anchor in Henry's life. The two had a solid partnership based on mutual respect and love. Together, they found a balance that brought happiness and purpose to each day. Evelyn, with her wisdom and compassion, was the heart of the foundation, ensuring that every action was guided by the principles they valued: empathy, integrity, and an unwavering commitment to the well-being of others. One fall afternoon, Henry, Evelyn, and Noah gathered to dedicate a new community center in Detroit, the place where it all began for Henry. The event was small but significant, attended by people from the community who benefited from the foundation's programs. Alongside Evelyn and Noah, Henry cut the ribbon, marking another chapter in his journey of transformation. After the ceremony, as he watched Noah play with other children in the park next door, Henry reflected on his life. He didn't know what the future held, but he was certain of one thing: he had found what he was looking for. He had learned that true wealth was not in material possessions, but in the connections we created, the lives we touched, and the changes we made. Henry knew his journey was not over. He would continue to face challenges, learn and grow. But as he looked at Noah and Evelyn, he felt a deep certainty that, no matter what happened, he had found his place in the world, a place where he could live with purpose, surrounded by love and guided by the desire to do good. And with that, Henry Montgomery, the man who was once consumed by ambition and pride, finally found the peace and happiness he had always wanted. He had overcome his failures, transformed his life, and above all, he had learned that the greatest journey is the one we take within ourselves.